Supreme Commander Zektar stood in the center of his flagship's command chamber, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. 2,000 warships moved through space in perfect formation under his command. This was the largest fleet the Vexani hegemony had assembled in over a century. Today would mark the beginning of the end for human resistance. The command chamber was massive and dark, with only the glow of computer screens providing light. Dozens of Vexani officers worked at their stations coordinating the movement of the Great Fleet. Their gray skin and large black eyes made them look almost like living shadows in the dim lighting. Zektar preferred it this way. Darkness was the natural state of his people. Fleet Admiral Quindar approached the tactical display and pointed at a small blip near the edge of sensor range. The readings showed a single human warship following their fleet at a safe distance. Zektar looked at the data and felt amusement rather than concern. One ship against his mighty armada seemed almost insulting. The intelligence reports on human military capability were clear and detailed. Humans built their ships like crude hammers, designed to smash through enemy defenses with brute force. They lacked the elegant technology and sophisticated tactics that made Vexani fleets so deadly. Their weapons were powerful but simple. Their defenses were tough but predictable. Quindar suggested they should dispatch a squadron to destroy the human vessel before it could report their position. Zektar shook his head with a dismissive gesture. Let the humans know about the fleet. Let them understand the hopelessness of their situation. Fear was a weapon just as powerful as plasma cannons or quantum torpedoes. The Vexani had been studying human psychology for decades. They were an emotional species driven by primitive instincts like courage and loyalty. These traits made them dangerous in small numbers but became weaknesses when facing overwhelming odds. Humans would throw away their lives for abstract concepts, like honor and freedom. Zektar had personally overseen the destruction of 12 human colonies during his long career. Each time the pattern was the same. The humans would fight bravely against impossible odds until their defenses collapsed. Then they would surrender or die rather than accept Vexani rule. It was wasteful but predictable. New Terra would be different, though. This colony was too large and important to simply destroy. The Vexani Empire needed human slaves to work in their factories and mines. 50 million people would provide decades of useful labor if they could be properly broken and controlled. The key was to crush their spirit completely in the first attack. The tactical officer reported that advanced scouts had mapped the defenses around New Terra. A small fleet of patrol ships and some orbital platforms armed with missiles. Against a normal raiding force, these defenses might delay an attack for a few hours. Against 2,000 warships, they would be swept away like dust in a solar wind. Quindar pulled up detailed analysis of the human ship that was following them. The vessel appeared to be their newest class of dreadnought with heavy armor and powerful weapons. According to the database, it was called the USS Defiance and commanded by an officer named Kate Morrison. Her service record showed victories against Vexani raiders in the past. Zektar read through Morrison's file with growing interest. She had earned a reputation for aggressive tactics and refusing to retreat even when outnumbered. The humans considered her one of their best commanders. That would make her defeat even more satisfying when the time came. Breaking their heroes was always more effective than killing them. The fleet continued toward New Terra at steady cruising speed. There was no need to hurry since the humans had no way to stop them. Zektar wanted his forces to arrive rested and ready for the ground invasion that would follow the space battle. Conquering a planet required more than just destroying its defenses. A communications officer reported intercepted human transmissions from the USS Defiance. The ship was gathering detailed scans of Vexani formations and weapon signatures. Morrison was clearly planning some kind of attack despite the hopeless odds. Zektar found this both predictable and amusing. Humans never learned when to give up. The Supreme Commander studied the tactical display showing the positions of all his ships. The fleet was organized into 20 battle groups, each containing about 100 vessels. Heavy cruisers formed the core of each group with destroyers and frigates providing escort. At the center of the formation, his flagship led a special group of dreadnoughts. Each battle group was powerful enough to conquer most star systems on its own. Together they represented the full might of the Vexani military machine. No human force had ever faced anything close to this level of firepower. The few times humans had fought large Vexani fleets, they had been crushed within hours. Quindar reminded Zektar that intelligence suggested humans were developing new weapons technology. Recent battles had shown improvements in their shield, generators, and energy weapons. The USS Defiance might have experimental systems that weren't in their database. Zektar dismissed this concern with a wave of his hand. Even if humans had made advances in their technology, they were still decades behind Vexani science. The Empire had been building warships for thousands of years, while humans had only reached space a few centuries ago. Experience and knowledge couldn't be overcome by enthusiasm and determination alone. The tactical display updated to show New Terra growing larger as they approached. Long-range sensors detected the colony's defensive platforms powering up their weapons. The small human fleet was taking position between the planet and the approaching invasion force. They knew they were going to die, but they would fight anyway. Zektar felt a moment of something that might have been respect for human courage. Then he remembered all the Vexani warriors who had died fighting these primitive creatures over the years. Respect was a luxury he couldn't afford. Today would be about revenge and conquest, nothing more. The Supreme Commander gave orders for the fleet to maintain formation and ignore the lone human warship unless it attacked. Morrison's vessel was too small to threaten his Grand Armada. If she wanted to throw her life away in a futile gesture, that was her choice. The Vexani would not be deterred from their mission by one desperate human captain. As the hours passed, the distance between the two fleets continued to shrink. Soon they would be close enough for weapons range, and the final phase of the operation would begin. Zektar looked forward to adding another human defeat to his long list of victories. After New Terra fell, the path to Earth itself would be clear. Admiral Kate Morrison walked across the metal floor of her ship's bridge. The USS Defiance was the newest and strongest warship that humans had ever built. She had been its commander for 2 years now and knew every corner of the massive vessel. Today felt different, though. The air seemed thick with worry, and the crew moved with extra care around their stations. Commander Ryan Phillips sat at his tactical station, watching the long-range sensors. His fingers moved quickly over the control panel as new data came in. 3 weeks ago, they had left Earth on what should have been a simple scouting mission. They were supposed to check the outer edges of human space for any signs of alien activity. What they found was much worse than anyone expected. Captain Lisa Hayes stood next to Morrison, looking at the main display screen. The image showed thousands of small dots moving through space in perfect formation. Each dot represented an alien warship. Hayes counted them again and shook her head. More than 2,000 enemy ships were heading straight toward New Terra, the biggest human colony outside of Earth itself. Morrison had fought aliens before. The Vexani had been humanity's enemy for over 30 years. But this was different. This fleet was huge beyond anything they had seen before. Some of the alien ships on the screen were larger than entire space stations. The smallest ones were still bigger than most human warships. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of computers and life support systems. Every person there knew what those dots on the screen meant. 50 million people lived on New Terra. They had families, children, dreams for the future. All of that would end if this alien fleet reached the planet. Phillips turned in his chair to face Morrison. His voice was steady, but she could see the worry in his eyes. The sensors were picking up energy readings that didn't match anything in their databases. These weren't just regular Vexani ships. Some of them had weapon systems that could destroy a planet from orbit. Hayes moved to another station and started pulling up files on New Terra's defenses. The colony had a small fleet of patrol ships and some orbital platforms with missiles. Against a normal raiding party, they might have a chance. Against 2,000 warships, they would last maybe 10 minutes. Morrison closed her eyes and thought about her options. The USS Defiance was alone out here. The nearest human fleet was weeks away, even at top speed. By the time any help arrived, New Terra would be nothing but burning wreckage. She could turn around and run back to warn Earth, but that would mean abandoning millions of innocent people. The alien fleet moved with purpose and discipline. They weren't raiders looking for quick targets. This was an invasion force meant to crush human resistance once and for all. Morrison had read the intelligence reports about Vexani's strategy. They believed that humans were too weak and scattered to pose a real threat to their empire. Phillips reported that the enemy fleet would reach New Terra in 6 days if they maintained their current speed. The USS Defiance could intercept them in 4 days if they pushed the engines hard. Morrison knew that her ship was tough and well-armed, but it was still just one vessel against thousands. The crew waited for orders. Some of them had families on New Terra. Others came from different colonies that would be next if the Vexani weren't stopped here. All of them understood what was at stake. This wasn't just about one battle or one planet. This was about whether humans would survive as a free people. Hayes brought up tactical data on the USS Defiance's weapons and defenses. The ship carried the most advanced technology that human science could produce. Quantum torpedoes that could punch through any known armor, energy shields that could absorb massive amounts of damage, railguns that fired projectiles at nearly the speed of light. But even with all that firepower, the math was simple and brutal. 2,000 enemy ships against one human vessel. The USS Defiance might destroy dozens of them before going down, but it wouldn't be enough to save New Terra. Morrison needed something more than just weapons and armor. She needed a miracle. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, running calculations and checking weapon systems. They all knew that their admiral was facing an impossible choice. Run away and live to fight another day, or stay and die trying to protect innocent people. For most alien races, the choice would be obvious. Survival always came first. Morrison walked over to the communication station. The officer there was monitoring radio traffic from the alien fleet. Most of it was in Vexani language, but the computer could translate the basic meanings. The aliens were confident and relaxed. They saw this as an easy victory over primitive humans. That confidence might be their weakness. The Vexani had superior numbers and technology, but they had never faced humans who had nothing left to lose. Every person on the USS Defiance had volunteered for military service, knowing they might die defending their people. That kind of dedication was something the aliens couldn't understand. Phillips called out new sensor readings. The alien fleet was spreading out into attack formation. They would hit New Terra from multiple directions at once to prevent any chance of evacuation. Morrison realized that the enemy commander was smart and careful. This wouldn't be a simple battle, but a calculated slaughter. Hayes suggested they could send a message to New Terra warning them to evacuate. Morrison shook her head. Where could 50 million people go in just 6 days? The transport ships needed to move. That many people didn't exist. Even if they did, the Vexani fleet would catch them in open space where they would be even more helpless. Sombres, Admiral, made her decision. She turned to face her crew and saw the same determination in their eyes that she felt in her heart. They were soldiers of humanity, and they had sworn an oath to protect their people no matter the cost. Today they would find out if that oath meant anything when facing impossible odds. Morrison gave the order that would change everything. The USS Defiance would not run or hide. They would intercept the alien fleet and fight with everything they had. One human warship against 2,000 alien vessels. The crew responded with quiet professionalism as they prepared for what might be their final battle. Admiral Morrison stood at the center of the bridge staring at the tactical display. The alien fleet filled the screen like a swarm of angry insects moving toward New Terra with deadly purpose. She had spent the last 6 hours studying their formation and weapon signatures. Now it was time to make the hardest decision of her military career. The crew waited in tense silence for orders. They all understood the math. 2,000 enemy ships against one human vessel meant certain death for everyone aboard the USS Defiance. But running away would mean abandoning 50 million innocent people to slavery or worse. Morrison knew there had to be another option, even if she couldn't see it yet. Commander Jake Sullivan approached from the engineering section with a concerned expression. His team had been working on something called Protocol Omega for the past 3 hours. It was a desperate measure that had never been tested in actual combat. The idea was to overcharge the ship's quantum reactor beyond all safety limits to provide massive power output. Sullivan explained that Protocol Omega would give them enough energy to boost shields and weapons to incredible levels. The downside was that the reactor would eventually overload and destroy the ship. They might have 4 hours of enhanced performance before catastrophic system failure. After that, the USS Defiance would become a tomb drifting through space. Morrison listened to the engineering report with growing interest. 4 hours of maximum power might be enough to do serious damage to the alien fleet. It wouldn't save her, ship or crew, but it could give New Terra a fighting chance. She asked Sullivan how long he needed to prepare the modifications. The chief engineer said his team could have everything ready in 2 hours. They would need to reroute power conduits and install new control systems. Most importantly, they would have to disable all the safety protocols that normally prevented reactor overload. Once they started, there would be no way to stop the process. Lieutenant Commander Beth Warren joined the discussion from the weapons control station. She had been reviewing their armament and discovered something that might tip the balance. Hidden in the ship's deepest storage compartments were 3 prototype singularity torpedoes that few people knew existed. These weapons could create artificial black holes capable of destroying multiple ships at once. Morrison had heard rumors about singularity torpedoes, but thought they were still in development. Warren explained that the prototypes had been secretly loaded aboard the USS Defiance for field testing. Each torpedo contained enough compressed matter to create a black hole that would last for several minutes before dissipating into normal space. The weapons officer warned that these torpedoes were extremely dangerous to use. If one malfunctioned, it could destroy the USS Defiance along with any nearby enemy ships. The targeting systems had never been tested in combat, and the effective range was still unknown. They would be gambling with technology that might kill them all. Captain Hayes studied the tactical projections on her personal display. She ran combat simulations using the enhanced reactor output and singularity torpedoes. The results were better than expected, but still showed the USS Defiance being destroyed after inflicting heavy casualties on the alien fleet. They might take down 300 or 400 enemy ships before going down themselves. Morrison made her decision with the calm certainty that had earned her command of humanity's most advanced warship. They would implement Protocol Omega and use every weapon at their disposal against the Vexani Armada. If they were going to die today, they would make sure the aliens remembered this battle for 1,000 years. The bridge erupted into controlled activity as the crew prepared for what might be their final mission. Sullivan rushed back to engineering to begin the reactor modifications. Warren started arming the singularity torpedoes with help from the weapons maintenance team. Hayes coordinated with department heads throughout the ship to ensure everyone understood the plan. Morrison activated the ship-wide communication system and addressed her crew. She explained the situation honestly without trying to sugarcoat their chances of survival. They were about to attempt something that had never been done before. One human warship would engage an entire alien armada in hopes of saving innocent lives on New Terra. The response from the crew was immediate and overwhelming. Not a single person requested transfer to an escape pod or asked to be left behind. They had all volunteered for military service, knowing they might be called upon to make the ultimate sacrifice. Today that call had come and they would answer it with honor. Phillips reported that long-range sensors were detecting movement in the alien formation. The Vexani fleet was beginning to spread out for their final approach to New Terra. In less than 4 hours they would be in position to begin orbital bombardment of the colony. Time was running out for any intervention to be effective. The USS Defiance began accelerating toward the center of the enemy formation at maximum speed. Morrison dropped their stealth systems and activated all communication frequencies. She wanted the aliens to know exactly who was coming for them and why. Fear could be a weapon if used properly against an overconfident enemy. Sullivan called from engineering to report that Protocol Omega was almost ready for activation. The quantum reactor was running at normal parameters, but all the safety systems had been bypassed. Once they flipped the switch, there would be no going back. The ship would have 4 hours of incredible power followed by complete destruction. Warren confirmed that the singularity torpedoes were armed and ready for launch. The targeting computers had been programmed with the best available data on alien ship formations. Each torpedo would be aimed at the densest concentration of enemy vessels to maximize damage. They would save one torpedo for the alien command ship if they could identify it. Hayes pulled up communication intercepts from the Vexani fleet. The aliens were talking about the approaching human ship with amusement rather than concern. They clearly didn't consider one vessel to be a serious threat to their overwhelming numbers. That attitude might work in humanity's favor if they could maintain the element of surprise. Morrison looked around the bridge at her crew one last time. These people had become like family during their years together aboard the USS Defiance. Soon they would all be dead, but their sacrifice might save millions of lives. She gave the order to activate Protocol Omega and begin the final approach to the alien fleet. The lights dimmed slightly as massive amounts of power flowed through the ship's systems. Displays flickered and stabilized at new readings that showed everything operating far beyond normal specifications. The USS Defiance had become something new and terrible. A human warship pushed beyond all limits by desperate necessity and grim determination. The USS Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in front of the Vexani Advance Squadron. 12 heavy cruisers and twice that many destroyers suddenly found themselves facing a single human warship that seemed to have appeared from nowhere. For several seconds, both sides stared at each other across the void of space in mutual surprise. Admiral Morrison stood calmly on her bridge as enemy ships began turning to bring their weapons to bear. The overcharged reactor hummed with barely contained power that made the deck plates vibrate under her feet. Every system on the ship was running at levels that would have been impossible just hours before. Protocol Omega had transformed the USS Defiance into something unprecedented in human naval history. Commander Phillips coordinated the opening attack with surgical precision. Human railguns fired streams of tungsten projectiles at nearly the speed of light. The alien ships tried to maneuver, but physics worked against them. At these distances, there was no time to dodge. The first salvo punched through Vexani's shields and armor like they were made of paper, instead of advanced alloys. 3 enemy cruisers took direct hits to their reactor compartments and exploded in brilliant flashes of light. The remaining ships returned fire with plasma cannons and particle beams, but their shots splashed harmlessly against the enhanced shields of the human warship. Morrison had gambled that overcharging their defensive systems would give them enough protection to close to effective range. Lieutenant Commander Warren launched the first singularity torpedo at the center of the enemy formation. The weapon streaked through space, trailing exotic particles that made sensors scream warnings about gravitational anomalies. When it reached the programmed coordinates, the torpedo detonated and created an artificial black hole roughly 50 meters across. The effect was immediate and devastating. 4 Vexani destroyers were pulled into the event horizon and crushed beyond recognition. 2 more ships suffered massive structural damage as tidal forces twisted their hulls into scrap metal. The black hole lasted for exactly 90 seconds before evaporating in a burst of Hawking radiation that temporarily blinded every sensor in the area. Supreme Commander Zektar watched the destruction of his advance squadron with growing disbelief. The tactical display showed impossible readings from the human weapons. No ship should be able to generate that much firepower or maintain shields against concentrated enemy fire. Something had gone wrong with their intelligence estimates about human technology. The USS Defiance continued its charge through the outer edges of the alien fleet, leaving behind a trail of destroyed and crippled warships. Captain Hayes coordinated damage control as return fire began to take its toll on their enhanced systems. Hull plating glowed cherry red from plasma impacts, but the overcharged shields held against everything the Vexani could throw at them. Admiral Morrison felt a cold satisfaction as enemy ships died under her guns. These aliens had come to murder innocent people and enslave the survivors. They deserved no mercy and would receive none from her or her crew. The USS Defiance had become an instrument of human vengeance, cutting through their fleet like a sword, through silk. Commander Sullivan reported from engineering that the quantum reactor was holding steady, despite the massive power draw. His team had done the impossible by keeping the overloaded system stable for over an hour, but stress readings were climbing and microfractures were appearing in the containment field. They might have 3 more hours before catastrophic failure. Phillips targeted the next group of enemy ships with devastating efficiency. Human weapons had been designed for exactly this kind of close-range combat, where superior firepower could overcome numerical disadvantage. The aliens preferred to fight at long range using their technological advantages. At point-blank distance, raw destructive power mattered more than sophisticated tactics. Warren launched the second singularity torpedo at a cluster of Vexani battleships. This time the aliens were ready and tried to intercept the weapon with defensive fire. Their particle beams destabilized the torpedo's containment field, causing it to detonate prematurely. The resulting black hole was smaller, but still managed to destroy 2 ships and damage several others. Zektar finally overcame his shock and began issuing orders to his fleet commanders. The human ship was clearly using some kind of experimental technology that gave it impossible capabilities, but it was still just one vessel against thousands. He ordered his forces to converge on the USS Defiance from all directions and overwhelm it through sheer numbers. The tactical situation changed rapidly as more Vexani ships joined the battle. The USS Defiance found herself surrounded by enemies, firing from every direction. Even with enhanced shields, the accumulated damage began to show. Armor plating buckled and secondary explosions rocked the ship as overloaded systems failed under the strain. Hayes reported casualties throughout the ship as enemy fire found weak points in their defenses. The medical bay was overwhelmed with injured crew members, but everyone who could still function remained at their posts. They all knew this was a one-way mission and were determined to inflict maximum damage before going down. Morrison studied the tactical display, looking for the most effective target for their last singularity torpedo. The alien fleet command ship had to be somewhere in the center of the formation. If they could destroy it, the entire enemy armada might lose coordination and break apart. She ordered Phillips to scan for the largest energy signatures in the area. The sensor operator found what they were looking for about 20 kilometers away. A massive dreadnought twice the size of any other ship in the fleet was broadcasting command signals to the entire armada. Its shields were the strongest they had encountered, and it was surrounded by dozens of escort vessels. Getting close enough to attack would be suicide even for their enhanced systems. Warren armed the final singularity torpedo and programmed it for maximum yield. This one would be bigger and more destructive than the first 2, but also more unstable. If it malfunctioned, the resulting explosion might destroy the USS Defiance along with any nearby enemies. Morrison gave the order to fire without hesitation. The torpedo streaked toward the alien command ship, trailing gravitational distortions that made space itself ripple like water. Zektar watched its approach with growing terror as he realized what the humans were attempting. His flagship was the most advanced warship in the Vexani fleet, but even it couldn't survive a direct hit from an artificial black hole. The USS Defiance shuddered under concentrated enemy fire as dozens of alien ships poured their weapons into the human vessel. Systems failed throughout the ship, and the overcharged reactor began showing signs of imminent collapse. But they had done the impossible and proven that one ship crewed by determined humans could face any odds and emerge victorious. At least for a while longer, the USS Defiance continued to fight against overwhelming numbers with the desperate courage that had carried humanity to the stars. Every second they survived meant more damage to the alien fleet and a better chance that New Terra might escape destruction. That was all any of them could ask for in their final battle. The final singularity torpedo detonated just 50 meters from Supreme Commander Zektar's flagship, creating the largest artificial black hole the USS Defiance had produced. The gravitational field didn't hit the alien command ship directly, but it didn't need to. Tidal forces ripped through the massive vessel's hull while nearby escort ships were pulled apart like toys in the hands of an angry child. Zektar felt his ship shaking apart around him as structural supports failed and compartments collapsed. Emergency lighting flickered on as main power died and artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. Half his command crew was dead or unconscious, and the other half was too busy trying to save their own lives to coordinate fleet operations. The great Vexani armada was suddenly leaderless and in chaos. Admiral Morrison watched the destruction of the enemy flagship with grim satisfaction. The USS Defiance had succeeded beyond her wildest hopes in disrupting the alien attack. Hundreds of enemy ships were already fleeing in panic while others drifted helplessly with their command systems offline, but her own ship was dying around her and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Commander Sullivan's voice came over the communication system from the engineering deck. The quantum reactor was entering final overload phase and would explode within minutes. The containment field was collapsing and exotic radiation was flooding through the lower decks. His team had done everything possible to extend their time, but physics couldn't be cheated forever. The bridge of the USS Defiance was a scene of controlled chaos as crew members worked frantically at damaged stations. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits and smoke filled the air from burning electronics. Captain Hayes coordinated damage control efforts, but they all knew it was hopeless. Too many critical systems had failed and the ship was beyond saving. Commander Phillips reported that over 800 Vexani vessels had been destroyed or disabled during the battle. The remaining alien ships were scattered across a wide area, with many fleeing toward the edge of the system. Without central command, the invasion fleet had lost all cohesion and effectiveness. New Terra was safe for now, but the cost had been terrible. Lieutenant Commander Warren slumped over her weapons console as emergency medical teams tried to treat her radiation poisoning. She had stayed at her post despite exposure to exotic particles from the Singularity torpedoes. Her last act was to target the ship's remaining conventional weapons at nearby enemy vessels to cause maximum damage with their final shots. Morrison activated the ship-wide communication system one last time to address her crew. She thanked them for their courage and dedication in the face of impossible odds. They had accomplished something that military historians would study for centuries. A single human warship had broken the largest alien fleet in recorded history through nothing but determination and sacrifice. The USS Defiance fired its last salvo of railgun projectiles at a group of Vexani cruisers trying to regroup near the system's edge. The tungsten slugs tore through enemy hulls with devastating effect, sending 3 more ships to join the growing graveyard of alien wreckage. Then the human weapons fell silent as power finally failed throughout the dying vessel. Hayes made it to the bridge just as the main reactor reached critical overload. She had been coordinating evacuation efforts in the lower decks, but there weren't enough escape pods for everyone aboard. Most of the crew had chosen to remain at their posts rather than abandon their shipmates. They would face the end together as they had faced everything else. Zektar dragged himself to what remained of his command station and tried to assess the damage to his fleet. The tactical display showed a disaster beyond imagination. Nearly half his ships were gone and most of the survivors were too damaged to continue the mission. The humans had done the impossible and turned certain victory into crushing defeat with a single warship. The Supreme Commander managed to send one final transmission to his remaining forces, ordering them to retreat immediately. The invasion of New Terra was cancelled and all ships were to return to Vexani space for emergency repairs. It would take years to rebuild what had been lost in just a few hours of combat against desperate humans who refused to surrender. Morrison felt the deck plates buckling under her feet as the USS Defiance entered its final moments. The quantum reactor had reached the point of no return and would explode within seconds. She looked around the bridge at her surviving crew members and felt proud of what they had accomplished together. They had saved 50 million innocent lives through their sacrifice. The Admiral opened a communication channel to New Terra and transmitted her final message. She told the colonists that the Vexani invasion had been stopped and they were safe. The USS Defiance and her crew had held the line against impossible odds. Now it was up to others to build on their sacrifice and ensure that humanity remained free among the stars. Sullivan's voice came over the speakers one last time, reporting that reactor containment had failed completely. Exotic matter was flooding through the ship's corridors, and the explosion would happen in less than 30 seconds. He thanked Morrison for giving him the chance to serve aboard the finest vessel in human space, and to die alongside the best crew he had ever known. Phillips managed to maintain long-range sensors until the very end, and reported that the surviving Vexani ships were jumping to faster-than-light travel as quickly as possible. The alien fleet that had seemed so confident just hours before was now fleeing in complete disarray. They would carry word of this defeat back to their empire, along with a new respect for human determination. The USS Defiance exploded in a burst of light that could be seen from New Terra's surface 20 million kilometers away. The quantum reactor collapse created a brief artificial star that illuminated the battlefield littered with alien wreckage. In that moment of destruction, something legendary was born that would inspire humans throughout the galaxy for generations to come. Warren's final weapon systems activated automatically as the ship died, firing one last spread of conventional torpedoes at nearby enemy vessels. Even in death, the USS Defiance continued fighting until the very end. The explosions destroyed 2 more Vexani ships and sent others limping away with critical damage to their engines and life support systems. The wreckage of Admiral Morrison's ship drifted through space, surrounded by the debris of over 800 alien vessels. Emergency beacons from Vexani survivors filled the radio spectrum with calls for help. The great invasion fleet that was supposed to conquer human space had been shattered by one warship crewed by people who valued freedom more than their own lives. News of the victory spread throughout human space within days. The impossible battle became known as the Defiance's last stand and inspired a new generation of naval officers. Admiral Kate Morrison and her crew had proven that courage and determination could overcome any odds, no matter how hopeless they seemed. The Vexani Empire never again attempted a direct assault on human territory, having learned that some enemies were too dangerous to face in open battle.